Hello, everybody. Welcome back to High Vibin' It. Thank you for being here. This is your co-host, Kelsey Aida. I'm here with my bestie and co-host, Lindsay Robinson, and we have a very special guest on today to talk about a super juicy topic that I think is going to help everyone in a very real and practical way. So if you love or like or eat sugar, then I think you'll find this podcast episode extremely helpful and beneficial to your overall well-being. So, with that, I just want to introduce Mike Collins. Mike, can you tell everyone what you do and what you're here to talk about today?
Sure, I'm the sugar-free guy. Uh, I've been sugar-free for over 30 years, 31 years now, and I'm the founder of sugaraddiction.com and the Quit Sugar Summit. And we're out there educating folks. I started out with late stage food addicts, folks 200 and 300 pounds overweight, losing limbs, going blind,
Wow.
and they still couldn't quit sugar. The ultimate definition of addiction. So over the years, because my background was internet stuff, I realized that I had a larger responsibility or message to get out to folks who might be just harmful users and not maybe a late stage food addict. So, I grew up as a regular kid. I thought, I mean, but we had unfettered access to the sugar bowl. We could pour as much sugar on our Cheerios or our cornflakes as we wanted, and we're scraping out, quarter-inch, half-inch of sugar at the bottom with the milk. It was crazy. And my mother was a sugar junkie. It's kind of a sad story. My grandmother, her mom died when she was only 8 years old, and they owned the country store across the way. And they said anytime she came in, just give her anything she wants, candy-wise, right? So she grew up thinking that candy was love.
Yeah.
And that's how we grew up, right? We believed that, she would get us everything we wanted, almost, within reason. And we didn't have enough money for soda all the time. So we drank Kool-Aid with like 3 times the sugar. We ate bread and butter and sugar sandwiches when mom wasn't home. There's a great video on, yeah, right.
So you're an expert on this stuff.
I am an expert on this stuff. So there's a great video on YouTube. Eric Clapton's talking to 60 Minutes, and Ed Bradley says, "So Eric, this addiction thing, this started with heroin, right?" And Eric Clapton says, "No, Ed, it started with sugar." And he goes on to talk about bread and butter and sugar sandwiches. He said, I knew that changed my state. 5 or 6 years old, I was looking for something to change my state. So as a hypnotherapist, and you guys, you'll just remember, put a pin in that, it changed my state. So fast forward to about, 14, 15, I ran into beer and pot and other goodies. And I knew that changed my state. I was kind of shy and I could talk to girls and what have you. And we called it liquid courage, right? And so fast forward, I got sober at 28, which is a completely another podcast, but I went straight back to sugar, as do many folks who recover from drugs. They get back into the sugar, right? And I gained 20 pounds, thin, athletic guy, and I gained 20 pounds like in 30, 40 days. And so did a lot of people. And some of them gained 40 or 50 or 100. And so I went on to kind of have, I somehow talked my wife at the time into having 2 kids sugar-free from the womb until they were 6 years old and never had flour, sugar, or caffeine. And then only in the outside birthday parties for their entire childhood, never at home. And I went on to have a regular career in business and stuff. And the kids always said I should write a book about sugar. So about 10 years ago, I did write a book about 4 or 5 years ago, but I bought sugaraddiction.com. And I started giving out the best information on the internet about this kind of malady, because I had worked with folks over the years in the addiction world. And some people took it and ran with it, but most folks, they just kind of read it like they read anything. And then when we started coaching about 3 or 4 years ago and started having groups and Zoom meetings and that kind of stuff, it really took off, because that's what it took. It took to join another tribe of folks who believe that sugar could be harmful.
Right.
So anyway, that's the short version. That's the podcast version. I can fill in anywhere you want or answer. It usually brings up more questions than it answers. So yeah, that's the short version.
So I'm just going to put it out there. I know there's people tuning into this podcast that are not going to want to hear
Mhm.
any of this, but I will plead with you and ask you to listen anyway because I'm going to hear some stuff that I don't want to hear about my dear sugar, but also that deep down I already know, and I think that that's probably something, Mike, that you see a lot is like we know it's bad, right? We know it's probably not great for us, but it's innocent. We've been trained to believe that it's an innocent
Mm.
addiction. So maybe that's where we should start is why have you taken such a stance on sugar um, being harmful? Where does that come from?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's a fair question in that, look, if I always I always answer that question by, look, if you could spend 5 minutes in my inbox or 5 minutes on my instant messenger, you would understand, as I mentioned earlier, people 200 pounds overweight, losing limbs, going blind, and they still can't quit. There's unbelievable amounts of pain out there.
Mm.
I'm For the last 6 years, we're going on our seventh one. We've done something called the Quit Sugar Summit, and we've interviewed the top experts all over the world to get the science. And not only have we seen, a flood of people into our coaching and everything. And when you talk to people who begin finally get honest about their weight loss and that they've tried 20, 30 different diets, that they just continue to fail at weight and health and all this kind of stuff, and they've kind of narrowed it down to sugar. And then they say to themselves, I'm going to quit, I'm going to quit, and they still can't.
Mm.
Then you start to realize that the problem is kind of underground and not really, people are not, they don't have anyone else to talk about it with because it is exactly like you described. One of the major modules in our stuff is the social aspect of it. This product you can give with no worries or ethical, moral, or legal ramifications to a baby, to a 1 year old, no problem. But when you start to talk to people that are, decades into trying to stop because they're trying to lose weight or change a health diagnosis like diabetes, and they still can't stop, then it models the place that I came from, 35 years ago when I got sober. And it's like folks are truly, truly physically, biochemically addicted to this substance and they cannot stop. That's about a third of people, as we break it down at the Food Addiction Institute. There's about a third of folks who, this weight issue, this obesity issue started when the high fructose corn syrup came into the diet in the 80s. And in earnest, I mean, there was some before, but very little really. And it tracks with the obesity numbers. And it's an epidemic so far beyond the COVID-19 and predates it. And as strange coincidence would have it, most of the folks who pass away with COVID had underlying metabolic issues like that are caused by sugar and high amounts of processed carbs. So,
Right.
okay, I'm done scaring people. I'm not going to, I like to live in the solution, but I do think it's important. Your question was a good one and one that most people think the way that most people
Mm.
think. You were very perceptive in understanding that and seeing that.
Well, because I just think that our initial reaction is to defend it,
Yeah.
like, well, it's not that bad because
Right.
you can just, like you said, you can buy it anywhere. I could give it to my baby. Like we've just been trained and believe to
Sure.
conditioned to believe that these things are innocent. However, I have heard a lot of things that I don't know are true. Like cancer is fed by sugar.
Mhm.
I know just from common sense that sugar is an immunosuppressant to some degree, and it can definitely have an effect on your immune system. And I just I know there's a lot of places we could go, and I hope that we get to most of these topics. But one thing I do want to know, one of the reasons that I have kind of been, I would say scared to get rid of sugar completely is because in my head, what I've heard is if you cut out sugar, you can't have any sugar, like no fruit, no nothing. Like
Mm.
how do you kind of navigate that? Do you have strawberries? Like, do you have, I don't know. Like, what do you do?
Do I have to do this for the rest of my life? That's
Right.
our number one question always. And the answer is maybe. It depends.
Yeah.
There are a certain, like I said, group of people who biochemically, when they ingest this product, get cravings for more, and then likely can't stop until it's all gone or they've binged beyond what they really wanted to do. And when you start, sometimes sugar or fruit will play a role in it. What's evolved in the last 5 years is something that's the science has proven out is just for your audience, and I'm sure a lot of them know anyway, but the fructose, the table sugar molecule is half fructose and half glucose, right? And we all know what the glucose does. It causes diabetes and metabolic syndrome, and they're calling Alzheimer's diabetes too. So it affects the body, or yeah, diabetes 3, excuse me.
Oh,
And,
wow.
it affects the body in a terrible way. Lewis Cantley said from the Cornell lab, when I interviewed him, I said, Dr. Cantley, does sugar cause cancer? He said, Michael, sugar causes cancer. I said, will you repeat that for a soundbite? He says, Michael, sugar causes cancer.
Yeah.
Now, the lab at Cornell is named after him. It's not like he's just some guy, right?
Yeah.
And so, yes, this is an issue. The sugar is an issue. And more importantly now, and you'll like this as a therapist or a hypnotherapist in the brain stuff, is that the other half of the molecule, the fructose half of the molecule, is the stuff that affects the nucleus accumbens, the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA. It literally grooves these neural pathways in your brain that you use to manage your emotions since you were a little kid. Your mother did it to you, right? She would give you a cookie and she'd say, instead of getting down, give you a hug, say, baby, what's wrong? She'd give you a cookie, head you to the TV. And you thought, just like my mom did, started to think, oh, I'm worried. I'll have some sugar. I'm scared. I'll have some sugar. I'm nervous. I'll have some sugar.
Let me stop you right there, because here's a little anecdote about my mother. Love her to death. She's great. My mother was so desperate to get vegetables into our bodies that she would give us cooked spinach, and just sprinkle sugar on it. And that's how we would eat sugar as kids. That's how we would eat our spinach as kids. And growing up, it's just another teeny thing. Growing up, I would go to my friend's house who had a lot of more money than my family did. And I was like, oh, I'm going to eat dinner at their house. It's going to be super fancy. And I found out during that dinner, it was just spaghetti, but she put sugar in the spaghetti sauce. I had no idea this was a thing. Apparently it's common, but spaghetti sauce comes with sugar in it already. And she's just putting sugar in it. And I ate it and I was like, what is this? This must be the fancy way people eat it. Because I have no idea. I equated that with like, maybe it's because they know things that my family doesn't know. But and I know there are people listening to this episode and thinking back at how many times sugar was just, like you said, have a cookie, go watch TV, or you're feeling sad, have some chocolate. Like, it's just so common. But I had to say that. I had to tell you that. I'm sorry, Mom. I have to call you out. She did it though. Like, we ate spinach. We ate our vegetables, but she had to.
I think
Same
it's
with
very
medicine.
common.
She put sugar on it,
Well, my mom told me showed me how to eat strawberries by dipping a moist strawberry into the sugar.
Oh, wow.
Like, what do you need more sugar in the strawberry for? So it's the same stuff.
And it's even worse because, like, I have 3 kids now, and I'm like, crap. What am I doing that's like training them to be addicted to sugar? I know there are things. So it is so good and beneficial to be mindful of this stuff and to know like all the stuff you didn't notice before, and now you're going to notice it. And that's very important,
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's the cultural part is part of my fascination. One part of my story that I left out is when I did get sober, I read a book called Sugar Blues. And Sugar Blues is the story of a guy who he was at a party one time. He was putting 2 lumps of sugar in his coffee, right? And a voice from behind him said, I wouldn't have that stuff in my house, let alone my body. He turns around, the voice is Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star, right? Ends up marrying Gloria Swanson. And that was her 3rd husband. And they went around and they promoted Sugar Blues. And in Sugar Blues, they talk about the English empire that grew from the backs of slavery and sugar, where they would go from England with empty boats. They would pick up slaves in the west of Africa. They would go to the Caribbean and the Americas and pick up molasses and sugar and rum and tea and coffee and bring it back, and literally took over the entire world. And El Chapo had nothing on this cartel. And so what happened 300 years ago was a shift in human society, where these things that were used to only had enough, they were so expensive that only kings and queens and noblemen could eat and drink, that now everybody could. Within a span of 150 years, we went from 5 pounds a year to 100 pounds a year. And now it's at 150 pounds a year of this substance. And no one is alive.
Is that per person?
Per person. That's before flour. That's before flour. So add another 150 for flour.
That's more than I weigh. What the heck is happening? Okay.
Right. You're passing, just think of those 5 pound bags. So you're passing those through your body that many times a year. And so no one is alive that understands, that has seen a society that evolved over 10 million years to not eat this stuff, to not, brain chemical stuff. And this is only 5 years old, the real science of the brain chemicals that this is affecting. Now, look, you take a little heroin, you take a little bit of cocaine, you take a little bit of alcohol, smoke a little marijuana, but we are pounding 21 teaspoons a day through our body. The dose makes the poison. The average human being alive today has never spent a day since they were probably in the womb without this much sugar manually manipulating their dopamine and serotonin, right? Doctors manipulate your serotonin. SSRIs, they're for Paxil and all of the depressant and antidepressant drugs. They're trying to dial in how your serotonin flows, how it's all works and everything. Hell, we're self-medicating on the sugar day in and day out all day. And when you stop, you actually go into a withdrawal of sorts, not of sorts, you go into an actual physical withdrawal. And so, and almost everyone goes through the withdrawal period, unless they had a really light habit. And so it's I like podcasts because I don't have a meat is murder kind of thing. I don't have a friends don't let friends drive drunk, right? What I have to set this all up a little bit, where I, tell the facts and what it's doing to the body, and then maybe hopefully we work into the solution. And it takes that long, about 30 or 40 or longer minutes, to kind of make sure people get it, because most people come with the same kind of thought process, like, it's just sugar, it's just cookies or whatever, they don't kind of think it all the way through, and they don't think the weight issue and the obesity epidemic all the way through, and they're not putting the whole 2 and 2 together. So that's kind of why I do these podcasts.
Yeah. And I think because not everyone is obese or overweight or sick, but there's people like that look super healthy, like me and Lindsay, but we still probably are consuming too much sugar and we don't even realize how it's affecting us. So there's a lot of quote unquote healthy people that seem and look healthy, but you don't even realize.
You nailed it right on the head. TOFI, it's called. Thin on the outside, fat on the inside. It's like people who have fatty liver and the fat around their organs and stuff. Hey, I worked with an Olympic athlete. This woman actually placed in the Olympics. I worked with ultra marathoners that run 100 miles a week, and they couldn't quit the sugar. They were fueled by sugar. And it took a long time for them to readjust, because their habit was so deep, because they would eat so much of it. And then it was fueling, the glucose was fueling their athletics. And so, yeah, the weight has absolutely nothing to do with this, literally nothing to do with this. So you're good call on that one for sure.
Yeah. And I think know how you parented kids without sugar. How did you do that?
What did they eat?
Only leaves. They eat? I need to know.
People used to walk up to us like they'd be in a high chair at a restaurant, and we would grab them stuff off the salad bar, and they'd be eating carrots and cucumbers and celery and whatever, and they'd be like, how do you get your kids to eat like that? Like, you just don't give them anything else. They really attracted to it. Plus, remember, they never had it in the womb either, so they didn't have any desire for it. They didn't really even know what it was till they were 4 or 5 years old. They really didn't think they had no idea what it was. And it really wasn't an issue. They were having so much fun at birthday parties when they were 3 and 4. They didn't really think about it then either. It wasn't a problem. It wasn't a problem until, like I said, when they were 6. They just knew at that point.
They knew, yeah.
They knew at that point.
I will say I do understand to some extent, because I'm a huge like anti-soda. I don't really drink it. My husband's really the only one that drinks it. So my kids just know it's not a thing. But they do have juice, and for treats they'll have, but I mix it with 75% water. Don't tell my kids I do that.
Good.
But they think they're getting juice, but they're not. So I do understand. Like, they just don't know what, for a really long time. I have an 8-year-old, but up until he was like about 6, same. He didn't even know what soda was. You know, he had no idea there was a carbonated sugar beverage out there that was waiting for him. Right. But even like if you train them young, not to expect it, I guess, then it's a lot easier than it sounds.
Well, I don't want to fall back on the scaring part, but we have an obesity epidemic in
just
3
scare
and
people. Who
3
cares?
and 4 and 5-year-olds, and we have an epidemic of fatty liver in 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. This is an alcoholic's disease. They don't drink any alcohol, so this comes from the fructose. It comes from the sugar. And it's just, the part that, I mean, yes, I work primarily now with adults, but the trajectory of my business and my practice or whatever is towards childbearing age women and children, because kids are tough. I mean, when you grow up overweight, you're just really setting the kid up for a really long life of low self-esteem and stuff. They just can't get over it, because kids are mean. They don't mean to be mean, I don't think. But when a child is overweight, it really is hard on them. And they don't, like you said, they don't have any concept. They certainly aren't going to the grocery store at 3 and 4 to buy their food. And, it's the adult's responsibility to give it to them. And so that norm, that sociological norm has got to change. It just has to.
Yeah. And when you go in the grocery store, this is one thing I noticed. We have just whatever the equivalent of Kroger is. We go in there, and on one side of the aisle is diapers, baby food, all the baby stuff. And I'm not joking you. On the other side, you just turn right around, candy, cookies. And like, they did that on purpose. For sure.
For sure
They're very sneaky. And they don't want your kid to like when they have all these like bright colors and characters and shit, they're not doing that for your kid's enjoyment at all. We're trained to think that, I get my kid, they understand. No, there's so much money. There's so much money in sugar. There's so much money in sugar.
Scary. I was nervous when I first started. I was afraid of those guys,
Really?
Oh yeah.
It's like a mob almost.
They're like a $1 trillion operation. It's
right.
Like,
they're like, who's this guy telling everyone not to eat our shit?
Yeah. And now it's like, there's a sugar. I mean, I've done these summits now, like I said, 6 years, and I get emails every day from coaches that want to be on it because they're, coaching no sugar or whatever. There's lots of us now. So.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I'm scared enough. I think everyone's scared enough now to want to make the change. So I love how you said focusing on solutions, and obviously it's important to identify the problem, because you can't go to where you want to go until you understand really where you are, right? It's like programming a GPS. You can't just be like, I want to get to Arizona, but I'm not like starting from anywhere. Like, you have to know where you're starting and where you're going. So now that we know a little bit about where we're starting, what is, I guess, some of your broader like overview starting points for people who are like, okay, I want to eat less sugar, now what?
Yeah, no, good question. I think the awareness, I mean, you have to kind of assess, well, like I said, if you're a food addict, a sugar addict, and that you've tried a million times and you can't do it, or you're what we call a harmful user, where, if you just stopped for a little while and got it kind of under control, that you might be able to have a little once in a while. But we have a lot of people who just are not willing. After I get you to 90 days, they're just not willing to go back. Their skin is clearer. They're falling to a right-sized body. Their brain fog is cleared up. They're sleeping better. They're not as irritable. They're not hungry all the time. So many things change that they're just not willing to go back. So the solution is different for different folks. And I always start with the real hardcore addicts, because it's some folks, I mean, I call it a scratch test. So if you were to go to the allergist, you would get a scratch test for ragweed or pollen or dust or whatever. And our scratch test is 30, 60, or 90 days with no sugar. I call it a sugar adulting. Okay. It's like, it's time. Like most adults literally eat like 3-year-olds or 5-year-olds. You know, they just want they want candy.
Well, I'm a pasta person, so I guess that's
same thing though, sugar. Really. Yeah. I mean, it turns to sugar in your stomach,
right?
Like instantly. And while there isn't the fructose component activating it, it's still, the glucose is activating. It's giving you cravings, setting up more cravings, right? And so, I ask you to eat broccoli. No, don't eat broccoli for 30 days. You'd say, no steak for 30 days. You'd be okay. You'd do it. But sugar, like people are like, they get weirded out.
Listen, and plus, just you saying those words, yeah. I want to shout out everybody listening that even at 30 days of no sugar, if that makes you feel a certain type of way, right, you're probably one of the people that needs to do it like me.
Yeah, right.
All right, go on.
No, it's so, I mean, and I actually do that same technique. I say, if that gave you a little tinge, like that you were not going to have it, it's like breaking up with a lover. A bad lover.
Yes.
Right. That's the hardest kind to break up with.
Right. A toxic, abusive lover who, can woo you right back, but you've got to like be strong for a time till you get past that. Literally, it's the same chemicals. This is the crazy part. It is the same chemicals that's bringing you back to the toxic lover as it is sugar. It's the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, all of these things, this giant chemical experiment in your brain is going off that we are manually manipulating, right?
Yeah.
And so once you understand that with the scratch test, with the abstinence, all of a sudden, like the fog lifts, literally a fog. This is, of all of the benefits at the end, at 90 days, I screw up your sugar use if I can get you to 90 days. If I can get you 90 days of 100% abstinence, most people do not want to risk going back. They fall into a right-sized body, their skin is cleared up, the brain fog is cleared up. And the most accentuated and talked about benefit is not weight loss. It's not even sometimes getting off diabetes 2 medicine, literally putting diabetes 2 in remission, which we have hundreds of cases of, is that people, the brain is, they're processing better. They can focus better. They sleep better. They're not as anxious or irritable. Migraines go away. They're just clearer. And that gift that they get is the one that they didn't know they were missing, because culturally they had never been without sugar. And they just thought that when they got a headache, when they're depressed or irritable, I mean, I have so many people that get off depression medicines. And, I have to qualify. I'm not a doctor, not a therapist. I don't tell them to get off. Their doctor tells them to get off after they've gone 90 days or more, or, with no sugar.
Hey there. Thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to watch the extended version where you get the full podcast episode in a video format, just go to patreon.com/highvibe. The link is in the description. That's where you can become a supporter of the show, listen to all the episodes via video format, and each week you get extended versions of the show, meaning you get to see the pregame behind the scenes, and also you get an extended interview with whoever we're guesting, or if it's me and Lindsay, we usually pull cards for you guys, fun stuff like that. So go check it out. There's lots of cool goodies, including a free copy of my book, a free audio hypnosis from Lindsay. She's a hypnotherapist. And yeah, we just want to give you all the goods, all the content. So head over to patreon.com/highvibe to become a Patreon.
Or if you'd rather listen to the rest of this episode, head over to highvibinit.com where you'll see all the links to everywhere that it's getting streamed. Click your favorite one and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening.